Hey, thanks for joining and welcome to Convention Not. In this episode, Lindsay-Jean Hard, author of Cooking with Scraps, joins Mike and I. We get to learn a little bit about creating a book, defining a new category, and a little bit of what it takes to go from job to building a career as a creative content builder. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Mike, who is an actual scientist, and I, who am a Google scientist, as you may hear from episode to episode. We're talking about like how we use cookbooks in our normal life. So I am a consumer of cookbook, like scientific cookbooks. And Mike, for the most part, you don't mess with science away from the job.
I was just saying, I cut myself off as you were logging in because I was going to go on a rant about how I'm sick and tired of talking to my buddies about fantasy football, and they want to ram statistics down my throat, and I'm just like, yeah, man, I get numbers, I get them. I already have a bunch in my head, and like, there's these other parts of my brain that are just, I don't know. I like to think of them as a little more active, and they're dancing around, and they don't want to be held down by all these numbers, and so when I cook, art, all that sort of stuff, that other part of my brain. I love your book because it right away visually, right? And as I read it, my other senses, and I'm enjoying it mostly on a subjective level. I know objectively it can hold its own, but yeah, I don't want to have to be perfect in those other areas, I guess. And it's probably more of a me thing, but yeah, that's my gist of why your cookbook in particular jumped out at me right away, like why it was appealing to me.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like if you're baking, that level of precision is really necessary, but it's just not in cooking.
And I maybe that I do not bake. I think honestly, like I can't mess with it. I just have to like put it together and then be patient for 2 hours. Like why would I want to do that on my free time? Sounds awful.
So Ryan, what kind of cookbooks do you like then? Do you like the Food Lab?
Oh, yep. I was talking about Kenji's Food Lab book, and Mike was looking at me all weird. My favorite one. But my other current favorite one is a book that's written by the chef from Noma.
Oh.
You're familiar?
Yeah. That's intense. Have you cooked from it?
Yeah, well, it's mostly about fermentation, really.
Yeah.
And so the book, I think, it's called
this one small niche part. It's a whole book about it. Man, that guy's a beauty.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What's his name?
Renee. I should know this.
I feel bad because I've seen him enough times.
Yes. Yeah.
Redsby. Yeah, I love that guy. First of all, I think I knew him through the Netflix documentaries first.
Yes.
And then a friend of mine got the book. But yeah, my 2019 has been mostly built fucking with fermentation. So ginger bugs. I have a kimchi culture that's 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
You need the visual with that audio to see the pride on Ryan's face. Mixed with embarrassment. It's is that kimchi culture hidden away? Because you clearly don't tell everyone about your 3-year-old kimchi culture.
If you open kimchi while anybody else is around, you tell everyone about kimchi. But it's I've just had it. I eat it every day, and I eat fermented foods every day. It's just part of my jam. So at some point, I started making them, and maybe I'll get some things out of the fridge as we go along here, because this podcast is about Lindsay-Jean Hard, who should, if you're still listening, one of our listeners, you should introduce yourself after being dropped into this very awkward, smelly conversation.
I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So yes, my name is Lindsay-Jean Hard, and I am the author of Cooking with Scraps. It's a cookbook all about how to use underutilized produce parts and other odds and ends. So jumping into this discussion is a perfect way to start an interview, I think.
Lindsay came to us through a mutual friend, and in our like journey this year to become better journalists, which is also something that is previous in your career too, right? We have started to learn how to interview, and so welcome.
Thank you.
It's pretty awesome to have you on the show, Lindsay. I've been excited about this one. If I accidentally say Lindsay, I'll correct that. Sorry, Lindsay-Jean. Our buddy, it's a friend of Ryan's, a mutual friend of ours, reached out and explained you pretty honestly, and it was pretty succinct. But he told us right off the bat, he's like, she's a U of M girl, guys. So just go easy, don't get crazy about it. Knowing, our Sparty allegiance, but other than that, it was like one of the first things I knew about you. The more I read about your background, your professional bio, I was really like excited and interested. It just seems pretty dynamic, a pretty like diverse way to go about the things you've been doing. I geographically and like, the subject matter.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely hasn't been a straightforward career path for me.
You said that you started to get interested in food when you moved to Tokyo at a greater level. Is there any way we could kind of start our discussion from that point, and you could tell us about how that kicked off a little bit?
Yeah. So I got my master's degree in urban planning, and I used that here in Ann Arbor for a couple years. And then my husband's job took us to Japan, and there wasn't a lot of work for me to be doing urban planning because we studied Japanese for a year before we went, but I definitely wasn't fluent.
No.
I could get around. And so I really just had a year to hang out and read a ton and plan all of our trips, a year and a half, actually. And we lived in this neighborhood with this really cute little neighborhood grocery store. And we became friends with the owner. And one day we noticed that they had boxes of vegetables out front for people to pick up. And so it was a CSA, a community supported agriculture. And we decided that we wanted to join that. So one of Mike's coworkers came and helped us sign up for this CSA. So we were getting these boxes of vegetables, and then I would have to walk back in the store with them because I had no idea what it was. And I'd be like, can you write down in Japanese what this is so I can go home and Google it and figure out how to cook with it? So it was the first time I really started thinking more. I mean, I liked food and I liked cooking before, but this is like, wow, like a farmer near here grew this for me. It's like, I should be putting it to good use and like honoring all that went into this. And so I started a blog and talked about cooking with no oven. And yeah, it was just a really interesting time for me with food. And while we were there, one of our college friends said that he was going to do this startup in Ann Arbor that was all about food. And it was called Real Time Farms. And it was a way for people to find food that they felt good about eating. And I knew him socially, but I didn't know him that well. But I was like, I have to be a part of this. Like, it was just one of those moments where you feel like something come over you of like, this is meant to be. And they were going to start it right when we were moving back to Michigan. So the timing worked out really well that I helped he and his wife create this startup from the ground up.
Okay. Was it a CSA as well in
No, so it was a website that helped connect people to food. So you could look up farms and read all about their growing practices. You could find farmers markets near you. And then we expanded to include restaurants. And then the restaurants could put up their menu and then they could link back to the farms and the farmers markets where they were getting all of these things from.
Okay. So almost like some validation to a certain extent of farm to table.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, it was really an exciting time. And, we learned how to do everything. Like, you're wearing all these different hats when you're doing a startup. And we had a really incredible team of advisors that were just really big names in the food world that we were lucky to learn from. And two of those people were Meryl Stubbs and Amanda Hesser, who own food52.com. And they ended up acquiring us. And then two of us went on to then work for Food 52. So I was there for 6 years and was a writer and an editor and community manager. And I had a column called Cooking with Scraps, which is where the cookbook came from.
Okay.
All right. I've been quiet for like 3 minutes now, and that was a really cool story. I love
I can
the
see your
idea.
blood pressure going up.
I know, I'm just so excited. Like, that's such a sincere, honest way to come about this. Like, you literally got ripped out of your environment, put somewhere else. We're like, shit, I gotta figure, I don't know what I'm even working with here. This is what's available. I better figure it out. We don't need to get too far into it, but just, are you from the Midwest originally?
Yeah, I am. I'm from Grand Rapids.
Oh, shoot. Okay. So, like, same, kind of cultural milieu as Ryan and I, Southern Michigan. So Japan, I mean, it goes without saying, was extremely removed from anything. I mean, at least in Ann Arbor, there was a little bit of there's a little bit of an Asian culture. Were you like a little bit rural? I mean, why, or were you just trying to be community oriented?
This was just super convenient. There was a bigger grocery store nearby also that we would go to. But it just feels different, even when you can't fully communicate with someone, to have like a really small staff that they just recognize you when you come in, like you have that little extra level of like meaningful interaction with them.
It motivated you, right? Like I used to have a couple spots in Toronto, and it was the same thing. Like, had they not been beneath where I lived, I don't think I would have tried that hard, but they were there, and to be honest, there was a very different demographic. There was a lot of refugees in the area I was living, a big immigrant culture. So it was the same type of thing. I went in there because, to be honest, I wanted to be friendly. And then all of a sudden I'm walking out with my hands full of stuff, and I mean, but I didn't do it. I just screwed it up. The idea that you started making a blog, and so I brought it back there on purpose because I'm trying to envision you just left grad school. Urban planning is an awesome degree in my opinion, but all of a sudden you're somewhere else and that degree is doing you no good. Like, sorry, but
yeah, and, no, it wasn't.
You started off writing a blog. Obviously you didn't have maybe immediate financial aspirations. Like, you're just kind of biding your time a little bit, keeping yourself busy.
Yeah, and like a way to chronicle it for friends and family back home to see what we're up to too.
It sounded like a visa set. Yeah, like a year.
Yeah, it was a year and a half. Yep.
Okay. But then that connection with the startup back in Ann Arbor kind of launched that, right? And I mean, that's now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Your world now is at least at the moment, it's around food, right? So how did you transition into kind of such a, you mentioned that the newspaper article, Cooking with Scraps, but the business, you're juggling all those things at the same time?
Well, we did Food 52 or Real-Time Farms rather for a few years. And then Food 52 acquired us, actually. So just two of us went on to then work for them. So there was a little bit of overlap before we ended up shutting down the site. But for the most part, they were two different distinct times of just like one growing into the other.
Okay. Does Food 52 carry on kind of a validation of farm to table in the same way? Did they?
We had hoped that Real-Time Farms might be integrated more into Food 52, but they sort of shifted directions a little bit and didn't pull that in, really.
Okay.
I know that better than anybody. I sold a business. Probably should bore with all those details, but similar kind of a thing. We thought we were going one way, sold business, and then change the other way. Did you come by happenstance into social media and marketing yourself in that way? I mean, because I guess if I'm just adding up the years, you were here for a couple of years, there for a couple of years, a blog originally from Japan to keep your friends and family updated is a big difference from writing, in such a publication or online publication as 52. How does that path happen?
Again, it was just sort of a roundabout thing. Like for Real-Time Farms, we had to do so many different things. Like we were writing our own press releases. We were writing blog posts. So I've always loved reading and writing. My stepdad told me that I should have gotten an English degree and been a teacher, and he might have been right. It would have been a more direct path to where I ended up. But I started writing more and more. And then when we were acquired and I started working for Food 52, I was doing more community management stuff at first, but then they were looking for someone to take over a column called Down and Dirty, where we would talk about a specific like type of produce and write about it. And I was like, me, yeah. I have to do that column. So I started from there and then just expanded to other columns and doing more editing and yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'm just imagining you in this now, like such a kind of creative, almost like journalistic world. And I didn't go to school for urban planning, but it just seems, very, very different. You know, you took a turn and kept going down that road, right? I mean, was it immediately gratifying? Like, did you just, like I said, you didn't start the blog with financial aspirations, but each step of the way, you're having success, right?
Yeah. And more than like success, it was like, I feel like I'm in the right spot. Like it was, you know, like some of my friends that you grow up with, they always know what they want to be when they grow up and have this direct path. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I like different things. I like learning a lot. Like I like having my hands in lots of different things. But once I started going this direction, I was like, yeah, like this is where I'm supposed to be. Like food feels right.
Got it.
It starts to click.
Yeah.
I like that. Is your partner, you mentioned Mike, sorry, and I saw the dedication to him in the book. His great name, obviously, I picked up on all that. Can I ask if is he in the like culinary world at all, creative world at all, or?
No, he's not. He's an engineer at GM.
I knew it.
Creative, technical folks.
Sorry, between Japan and I don't know how. I just had a hunch that you were married to an engineer.
It's the yin and the yang. You got to balance each other out.
I usually try to bring my wife on here just to give Ryan a break from me. But yeah, the yin and the yang is very important.
Hey, it's Ryan. Thanks for listening today. I'm curious, when we showed up before you started the episode, did we show up automatically in your feed because you've subscribed to us? Or are you still one of those people who's out there and we show up randomly on your podcast channel? What I want to ask you to do is to take a second, pause the episode, jump out and hit that subscribe button. It's helpful. We're everywhere. YouTube, iTunes, all the tunes, anywhere you might be able to search us. Find us where you listen and subscribe. We appreciate it.
So I think that gives like a really big kind of like overview point. And both of us having been, you know, kind of like junkies of both literature. I guess cookbooks are literature, right?
Sure.
You have to be literate to consume them. But, you know, both of us immediately bought a copy of this. And one of the things that I thought was like the coolest, and I don't necessarily want to make you retell the story, because if you want to search Lindsay-Jean, you will learn about this banana cake, banana peel cake. It has like this kind of really cool social splash, I thought, especially after I had met you and started to talk a little bit, that maybe is a little bit, you know, part of like promoting the book, right? But could we talk a little bit about coming up with recipes? Because I know that some of them were provided to you by the readers of Food 52, right? But now you set up because you're going to create a cookbook. Like, how the hell do you start? And is Mike the only kind of like victim / beneficiary of, you know, carrot tops or, you know, some of the things you describe? Like, what's the philosophy to start to like expose your friends and family to basically like table scraps? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And then how do you write about it? Like, how do you record that through the process?
Well, it was a really interesting process. I've learned since my experience that it doesn't always happen this way, but I was approached by a publisher because they had found my column and they knew that food scraps was an up and coming topic. And so they were looking for someone specifically to write a cookbook and asked if I would like to. And I said, yes, of course I would like to write a cookbook.
That's exciting. Okay.
So then the next step is they're like, you need to come up with a table of contents for your cookbook. So like I had a couple of recipes of my own, but then the vast majority of my column was sharing other people's recipes. So I can't use that in my cookbook. So I can be inspired by them, but then, you know, I have to come up with a list of between 80 and 100 recipe titles that I am then going to create after the fact. So I had like a few weeks to give them that table of contents. And I knew that I wanted it to be A to Z because I wanted it to be more of a reference guide for people to use, the parts
Kudos
they don't
to that,
know how.
by the way.
Thanks. But it's kind of hard because you're going through and you're like, well, okay, like, have I hit a B? Have I hit like an F? Like, can I maximize the number of letters and types of produce in here? And then, Mike was the first and main victim, but I can't just be able to cook it in my kitchen. Like, other people have to be able to cook it too. So then I sent out an email to friends and family to be able to get recipe testers that are willing to not get paid to go buy stuff and try making this in their kitchens to make sure it works for them too.
Okay. So in classic publisher format, they kind of give you the premise and the impetus, so to speak, of the book. And then do you just start with like a bunch of poster board or a whiteboard kind of thing and start to map things out?
Yeah, I'm notepad and paper and pencil. Yeah. Making lists, coming up with ideas, scratching off the ones that don't work.
Okay.
From that first phone call to the next phone call, it goes from like really exciting and I'm going to write a book and live out my dreams to like, oh my God, my dreams just got that would be so daunting and like frustrating really at the same time, right? Like all of a sudden you get a chance to deliver this beautiful thing and you have to hurry up, do it quickly, and meet some other guidelines, right? But that's the nature oftentimes of doing something creatively, but working with a big company, i.e. a publisher, and getting your stuff out there, right? Like, in other words, that compromise is inherent to anything you're going to be doing on this level, I would say. And I mean, I don't know, Lindsay, for your first book, like, it's beautiful. It's, absolutely beautiful. I think it's a little bit, I would go so far as to say it's a little bit easier to get our thoughts out there to the world these days, i.e. Ryan and I can do a podcast, but like this is old school, proper, real book. Go to Barnes and Nobles and, buy it. Like
I got mine from Amazon.
I did too, to be honest. But I'm in Hawaii, man. I'm in Hawaii.
What the fuck?
Like,
Barnes and Noble?
Isn't that the last place you probably bought a book?
No, I went to my local bookstore.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we've already established you are a better person.
I like the CSA and the local bookstore. A woman after my own heart in small business.
Girl, all right. I'm telling you, I'm sad to say that Cooking with Scraps is currently not available at my local bookstore. It's not. But if you want to know the 10 biggest waves caught last year, that's available in DVD and hardcover.
Okay, good to know.
So,
I was wondering.
I just didn't move to the culinary center. We'll leave it at that. It's not the center of much, but.
So to bring it back from some of the crazy fruits, because perhaps Mike should send you some kind of weird list and his own CSA box of like some of the indigenous things that occur in Hawaii.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
I guess what is so infatuating to me as like this, I went to college on this journalism scholarship and then diverted away from it. So I always like have this romance of a career with creativity like that. And we've talked about this a bunch in the show, and that like my production is typically more Excel spreadsheets and things that don't excite anybody, nor could be read by anybody, right? So what is the weirdest thing maybe that you have encountered in promoting a book, right? I mean, I think most of our listeners are kind of like small business oriented. They understand like the promotion and you wrote it and all those types of things, right? But then you go out and like, it's not, with all respect, and as good as that book is, you're not quite Brene Brown, right? So like how or what could you tell us about promoting a book that A, would help our listeners if they wanted to do it, right? Or B, kind of like shock the shit out of you as you started to learn and kind of get out there and try to promote what, because the publisher has requirements of you of some regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And my publisher in particular has really high goals with how many books they sell. So for me, like my last report was in June and I had sold 10,000 books. And I kind of had no frame of reference for that. Like, that sounds like a lot to me. And when you tell other people, they're like 10,000 books. Like, I don't even know 10,000 people. Like that's a lot of people that you're selling to that you don't know. But I have to do like 4 times that to actually start making money on the book. So when you think about the volume that you have to do to be successful at this, and then like through Food 52 and through writing this, like I've connected more with other cookbook authors. And so it's nice to have other people in the field to like ask questions to and bounce stuff off of. But you realize pretty quickly that like if you want to be a cookbook author and like make a career of it, you're pretty much on a 2-year cycle of like you pitch the idea, you start writing it, and then like while it's in print and getting design and layout, you're working on your next book. Like there's no stopping. Like you just have to keep going if you really want this to be a career.
Just keep churning them out, right? I mean, it's similar, right? Like in the restaurateurs, right? They can't survive and have an awesome restaurant for 10 years. So, and I apologize if you were clear about it, but just give me a timeline from the time that Workman called you, like your publisher initially called you. Like how long ago was this? So we're talking...
So this came out in October of 2018. So it's a little over a year old. And so it was the end of 2016 when they called me. And so then I basically had 2017. I had 9 months to work on it and then turned it in. And it they were originally going to have it be a spring of 2018 cookbook, but they shifted it to the fall. But I had already turned it in, so that timing shift didn't matter. But it takes a long time for the design and layout, and the actual physical printing of the books takes months.
What sort of, is there like is that process that, I mean, is it 9 months or is it 3 months?
The part that I'm not involved in was like...
That's exactly what I was going to ask about. At this point, are you still involved, or if you put it in an envelope, shipped it off, and they'll let you know when they're done?
Yeah. Basically, I think, no one knows who I am. If I was a big deal cookbook author, I would have more input on stuff. But they gave me like a few sample design layouts, and I gave a lot of feedback, and some of that feedback was incorporated. And they had an amazing photographer. Penny De Los Santos is incredible. She shot all the photos, but they also had a food stylist and a prop stylist, and I was not in New York for any of that. So like all of that was done.
That's great, because I think it's a good topic. Hopefully it's not a sore subject because the visuals are incredible. But are you telling me that when you make a cookbook, like all the text, you didn't have any say on any of these photographs?
Well,
I don't mean to be being negative. I'm just being weird and curious.
No, I mean, I find all of this stuff fascinating too, because you learn so much as you go through it. I came up with a list of like, I really love these recipes. I would love to see these photographed, or I think that these would photograph well. So I had suggestions, but then they come up with their own.
They're the professionals, right? I mean,
And then there was some cases where they photographed it and they would add a garnish, or they did something that I didn't talk about it at all. And so then I had to go back in to the head notes and address
some technical corrections, right?
Because that drives me crazy when you see photos in a cookbook and it doesn't match. I'm like, there's no scallions. Where did the scallions come from? Like,
oh, I'm so with you. I'm right with you with that neurotic craziness. If it isn't even neurotic, is when it misses that way. That's so interesting because it takes so many creatives to create something like that, right?
Yes.
And everybody undoubtedly has their own expertise and skill set. But with the way that we fly people all over the place for other types of business, I mean, for example, I'll fly somewhere next week and be back the next day, right? It's crazy that they would not bring the creator of the content to create the images. And I know I'm sure every book deal is different and all that kind of has it, but like what a small expense as compared to printing thousands of books, for example, or something like that to bring something somebody to a city in that regard. So it's always interesting for me to kind of like drill down into the like maybe not the logic, right? Because we can't understand the logic of that. And again, everybody's a professional in the way they build their things. But to me, that would be probably like the most important.
It would be something I would definitely ask for if I did this again.
Yeah. Especially with the style of cookbook too, right? Like that garnish may not even really work. Or it's not a scrap, right? You know, like that point blank.
I was going to say there's a lot of nuance in your recipes that maybe they haven't done a cookbook like this before, right? Like that's the whole idea. And you're sitting there thinking, man, I've seen their other cookbooks and it shouldn't look like all of those, you know, it should definitely. So I asked you about how long that duration was because I can't imagine that going on for months and months.
Hey, it's Ryan. Are you ever listening to something and wonder what the people look like? Well, fret not, listener. We have made a plan for you. You can get right over to our Instagram at conventionnot_podcast and see pictures of most of our guests, Mike's goofy ass and I, or anything you really want to. Go over there again at Instagram at conventionnot_podcast. Take a second to follow us while you're there too.
How are you keeping busy enough during that time? We're going to talk about a bunch of other things, but I literally want to know, how are you not going crazy over
Well, it
that
helped
period?
that I was still working. Like I was still at Food 52 during this whole process.
Okay.
So, you know, I still had my regular job to be keeping
and
me
you've got
busy.
some comrades too, because Food 52, it seems at least, is mostly a media company, mostly a content company. So you've got some jokes to tell or kind of a thing around that point. So then there's a pivot of some regard, and the pivot I'm also very excited about because although I may have a little bit of disdain for the actual Wolverines, I freaking love Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
And I specifically love Zingerman's, as well as like most of the food scene in Ann Arbor. Not a big pizza guy, so that part I think.
None of those things are even subjective. Those are facts. Like if someone hates Ann Arbor, they're just sad and upset about things. If they don't like Zingerman's, they just have bad taste. You know, like
That's true.
I'm not flexible on those things.
I agree.
Without giving, spending too much time on a Zingerman's specific plug here, can you give for our listeners who aren't from the Southern Michigan area, like a proper introduction of Zingerman's? It's not, just a corner store.
Yes. Well, the Zingerman's community of businesses is made up of like 11 different businesses. So there's the deli, there's the bakehouse, there's the creamery and the coffee company and the candy store, and there's multiple restaurants. And then there's also Zingerman's mail order, which ships a lot of both Zingerman's products and other fun specialty food items anywhere across the country.
People, I feel like the word institution gets thrown around a little too heavily these days, but to me, Zingerman's is the essence of, and like a naturally grown one too. I don't want to say organic. I'm in a spiral of overly said words here, but yeah, I remember I read an article on Zingerman's a few years back, and basically talking about how it just did start as, the corner store and turned, not a corner store, but, food-based corner store. Yeah, exactly. But now it's spawned into, empire has a negative connotation with it, but it seems to be so intertwined with the community of Ann Arbor. There is no separation, right? I mean, you could not,
Man, I can remember I used to call into the University of Michigan Hospital a lot. We used to treat pediatric sleep apnea patients there, which is just kind of like a really weird, very specific business. And I would stand in line for an hour in the Zingerman's bakery to get whatever it was to bring to like the overnight sleep techs there at the hospital. And it would always be weird to me that I would not stand and wait for shit else. But Zingerman's, I would stand there and I would like look at all the stuff, pick up all the hot sauces, all this kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about, again, I guess both of us are addicted to talk about ourselves, which is part of making a podcast. But tell us about like the kind of the change. Like, you switch at some point, you publish a book. Now you're working a little bit on that side. What drew you there to go into the food production side?
It was another one of those kismet moments of like, I felt like this was meant to be, but it was when early on in publicity, I had a really well-known publicist for 3 months, like getting me out there with stuff, which was amazing. But she happened to know Amy Emberling, who is one of the co-owners of the Bakehouse. Okay, and the Bakehouse had recently published their own cookbook. And so my publicist, Carrie, was like, I think that you should meet Amy. Like it would just be a good connection for you. Like she recently published this cookbook. You can talk with her about promotion, because at that point I was not excited about the prospect of doing interviews and TV. Like that just scared the crap out of me. So talking to her for advice about that, and possibly teaching some classes at Bake, their baking school. And, being in Ann Arbor, of course, I love Zingerman's, and I had thought, one day it would be nice to work for them, but I wasn't sure exactly what I would do. Because, like I worked at a Great Harvest Bread in high school, like I've kneaded bread, but that's not really the direction that I had been moving and what I wanted to do. But so I met her and loved her and was like, I could see myself working at the bakery at some point, and a position opened up for part-time marketing. And again, I was like, I am supposed to have this job. And it was like 100 people applied, and I got it. And
100?
Yeah, apparently a lot of people like the idea of a part-time job.
At a bakery.
At a bakery. Yeah. So I've been there for a little bit over a year now, and it's been amazing. And it was, again, one of those sort of natural shifts where, I wouldn't have labeled myself as doing marketing at Food 52, but I had been doing some sorts of marketing things. But now I've just really transitioned at the Bakehouse. I do our e-newsletters, I do our Facebook and Instagram accounts, and it's been really fun to do more of the social media stuff too.
Okay.
We don't need to go down this road, but even if Zingerman's got bought by a corporation, like I don't think you could change its stripes. You know what I mean? Oh
yeah. It's very much its own iconic institution. Yeah. In a good way.
And we have a lot of those in Michigan. Like we have things like that I didn't appreciate until we moved away. But things
I
like
think Michiganders, Michigander is such a bad term. We should rebrand that. To be honest with you, you like the Michigander thing? It's really
it's
there's
perfect
two things
for the Midwestern accent.
It is
Michigander, right? It's over yonder. There's a couple things that I think we take for granted. One is the appreciation for small business, because it's not the same. And Mike, I know you live in a little bit different environment, but it's certainly not the same across the rest of the country. Because there is this like, and I don't know if it's a peninsula thing or not, but there is this kind of component about folks who are from Michigan that they stick together. And like there's a bigger kind of like sweater, pun intended, Midwest around that.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more special. And the other thing that I don't think that we appreciate so much is the access to the outside that exists in Michigan, right? Because it's cold, and that's what everybody talks about. And this always comes up on the show that Midwesterners introduce themselves like, "Hi, how are you? How's the weather?" kind of thing. But ultimately, like the access to the outdoors that's available in Michigan is not available anywhere else in the country, especially with how close it is.
Yeah, that's really true. But I mean, we have to have a benefit. It is so cold. I mean, there has to be a positive to it.
It's true. I agree. No poisonous snakes either.
Very true.
So, okay. So we're trucking along here. We're kind of up to the current part. And, ultimately, whether you set out to or not 15 years ago, you have built this extraordinarily diverse and extraordinarily dynamic career in and around food. What's next? I mean, is that something that you could talk about? I mean, I know we go back all of like 39 minutes now, but like from that perspective, I mean, you have to be somebody who dreams more, and I hope that I'm not being offensive here, but dreams more than just like owning a little restaurant somewhere, which a lot of us do, right? Like that's kind of the thing if you cook. But like, how do you see the food industry for you? Especially that local flavor. We talked about the Michigan way, or what certainly is part of you. How does that fold into the 2020s and beyond for you?
I don't know. It's a complicated question. I mean, I do have thoughts of a second book. I would like to write something for kids, ideally talking about food waste and what a serious problem it is, but also how they can help fix it, because so much of what we've screwed up is going to be handed to the next generation. But I also, sorry, my dog is going crazy.
I love it. I want to meet him too. Before this is over, I want to meet that guy too.
I know. I need to get him upstairs. He's cute. This whole process has been really great for me personally, just because I'm pretty introverted and shy. And like I said, I was not excited about the outreach part of this at the beginning of the process, but I've really come to enjoy it and enjoy connecting with other people. And so it's made me want to share this more and do more in my own community. So like I'm going to do like a kids cooking class this upcoming year, and I'm talking about doing stuff with my daughter's school. So just sharing both the message of reducing food waste, but also expanding my own personal community in my community is a really nice thing that I want to do more of in the upcoming year.
It seems like being at Zingerman's, given the brand, that's a good place to be, right? Because you have an avenue for almost each of those outlets that you spoke. In any way, right? Because they do a significant amount of education and courses and classes as well there on site, which is kind of neat. What type of a children's cookbook would you write?
I think it would have some recipes, but not like totally focused on a cookbook. I'm thinking part graphic novel, part informational text.
Oh man!
So like aimed at
designers, Detroit that would love to work.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
Thinking like older elementary, like middle school, maybe age.
Dude, that would be so cool.
It's so vital. I mean, I know for me, like I came to food because like I had parents who were busy and didn't cook, and I was the oldest and I cooked. But like at that age, that like older elementary age, that's the point where you could really, first of all, you start to develop the dexterity that's necessary to understand development of flavors. But secondarily, you're kind of at that point where you learn so much so quickly that it would be really neat to write to that market in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm equally like really excited about the idea, but also still kind of like, I know what the 9 months were like of writing this cook. Yes. Yeah.
What happens now? Like, you couldn't like do this in secret and like enjoy the process and then be like, here, it's done. Share that with, or like, is work. Sorry, these are maybe dumb questions, but is it like, if you put something out now with your name on it, do you have to have your publishers okay? Like, is it like a contract type thing?
I do under my contract, if I do a second book, it has to be pitched to them first. So they have the right of first refusal.
That makes sense. That's not surprising. Yeah. Okay. I would think so. I mean, it's a form of a non-compete, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask, and you don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but you mentioned something there when Ryan asked you to prophesize on your future about just reflecting on the past and how this process kind of helped you come out of your shell a little bit. And I'm paraphrasing there, I'm not quoting you, but I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit more, because Lindsay-Jean, like, we just met, obviously, and you seem incredibly social to me. And I think also, like, anyone listening is sitting there thinking, you had a popular regular column. The blog sounds a little bit more private. I don't know how widespread that was, but you were regularly sharing yourself and your creative thoughts with the world, but yet you still kind of considered yourself to be like an introverted person.
Yeah. And I would definitely still say that I am an introverted person. Like, I recharge by being by myself. And there's also a really big difference behind like me being on my couch on my laptop, like creating work to share with people that are who knows where in the world versus spending time with people face to face. And I did, like, that was one of my favorite things about Food 52 is I created 2 different Facebook cookbook clubs for them that each have like 40,000 members now. Okay. And it was like a very real community and connection. And I felt like I knew these people. And I still do. I still interact with them. But it is different than.
No, I can appreciate that.
And, it's taken this year of promotion for me to realize that it's not about me. it's about sharing the messages and the stories. You know, when I first started and it's like, you have to do live TV, and I would literally sweat through my shirt, just like panicked of that everyone's going to be looking at me talking. I'm like, no one cares about you. No one cares about me. Like, they just care about what you're talking about. Like, get over yourself.
Well, we all need to say that to ourselves each and every day. I don't care what you're doing and how intense your day is going to be. Everyone just sees you up there kicking ass, you know, and sees your beautiful book. And it's just like, man, I want that girl's life. And, you know, to not appreciate that you didn't sleep the night before because you're just like the rest of us. You're nervous as hell.
Oh.
And this is not something your publicist can totally prepare you for, right? Like, this is... You're going out on this stage and got to talk to people, and that's your bugaboo. Like, that's you, that's who you are. And, well, I don't think we appreciate that regularly enough. You know, we get an athlete who screws up and says something stupid. It's like, well, that dude isn't, he's really good at sports. You know what I mean? Like, we expect perfection in all these realms. And I appreciate you kind of being open about that. I was wondering, you mentioned the two Facebook groups. In the process, did you find that you gravitated a little bit towards, and I don't know that these are mutually exclusive groups, but I'm thinking about like the author people the writers you met along the way, and the kind of culinary people you met along the way. Was there a little bit more, because I'm thinking about some of them as being a little bit more competitive, maybe not as embracing of the new girl on the block. And you don't need to throw anybody under the bus there, but I'm just curious. Yeah, well, it's like, well, hey, I'm Lindsay-Jean. I'm coming to be your newest competition, right? Like, that doesn't always go over well. Some communities are a little bit more accepting than others. Did you find that, like, there's any difference between the kind of foodie people and like the writing people? Like I said, I don't know that they're exclusive, but
yeah, I feel like that does happen in some communities, like you mentioned, but luckily food is so inclusive and really pulls everyone together that I feel like that just happens with authors and like just home cooks that are really interested in it too. Everyone has been, for me at least, like incredibly supportive and done everything they can. Like, fellow cookbook authors will promote each other's stuff, like not just because you're friends, but you really believe in what they're doing and you want to share that. And there's also not a ton of people in this specific food waste space. There's a handful of us.
But it's still that part of the journey where you're happy you guys are helping each other along, right? It's not a trend, it's not a fad where there's a bunch of other people jumping on that band. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Like, books like this, there's going to be 10 more like this soon.
Oh, I'm sure there will be.
It's an incredible book, and it's beautiful, and conceptually is one thing, but there's so many, like, the first thing I thought when I looked at it, there's a beautiful, is it a beet or a radish on the cover?
It's a beet.
But the regionally specific types of scraps and food waste. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you have an article in here about what to do with discarded lobster carcasses, but I remember...
Stock.
Well, that exactly. It's a no-brainer, but, getting into, like, sheet crab soup and bisques and types like that, like, there's a lot of different takes on this concept. And
there are so many different regional differences, and, like, I'm not going to reach everyone. So it's important that there are a lot of different voices. Like, we need all of the different voices to reach everyone about it.
I was thinking Mike was gearing up to invite you and your Mike to Hawaii. Scrap, like, kind of like a... maybe you could start the streaming show that way.
Yes.
No, this guy
like visit different parts of the country, different parts of the world.
Mike sounds pretty solid. So far, I like everything I know about Mike, except
other than
the fact
Wolverine.
No, I have a few Wolverine friends. I mean, I'm an engineer, so I look up to my Wolverine engineering colleagues. They got into a better school than I did. But what I was gonna say is, like, just the regional aspects about it. It just made me think of a few of my friends here, and just how, because when I was in Toronto, this didn't seem to be as big of a, and I don't know if that was regional or just time chronological, but nowadays where I'm living, this is a very, I wouldn't call it emerging. It's a significant part of life here.
I'm glad that Marvin connected us all.
Yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah. No, I mean, ask your husband. I mentioned that earlier about like you and your peers, because I bet he doesn't hang out with a ton of engineers.
That's true. Yeah.
First of all, when you start to generalize people, you're already in trouble anyways, but there's definitely this like...
Whatever, I can generalize my people.
Yeah, sure. You could go down a whole different rabbit hole on that one with your people. There's a line.
I know.
That
what do you
I
mean
observed.
by that?
Right, exactly.
Did you say you people? My people? Anyway, there's a line between like engineering folk who are creative and who are not, and it's like a kind of a stark line. But maybe that line is in people, not so much in engineers.
No, you're right. Absolutely.
Maybe creative or not creative is kind of like the parent category, so to speak, in etymology.
Let me say this. There are some fields and careers that allow you to have social quirks, we'll call them.
Yes.
And almost complement and support those quirks because they're beneficial in those fields.
It's a really good way of putting it.
Dude, if I was the best programmer in the world, no one would hire me. I'd be walking around talking to all the other programmers and shit. They'd be like, this guy is bad for productivity. We cannot,
Pretty sure you just described Jared from Silicon Valley, but I think you're well placed there, and that was also well put. He's got a lot of practice, Lindsay-Jean, because he's an expert witness. So you gotta apply that with a grain of salt.
Noted.
All right. Well, I think we're probably getting toward the end of our session here. I want to, as we always do, my dog literally tapped me in the back. I don't know if you saw that. I guess he's done with the session as well.
He's over it.
He tapped me on my shoulder. As we end the show here, it'd be great if you could give some shout out to your social publications, the place that we could find you, best place to find your book as well. Like you said, we found it on Amazon. And again, we just thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. The best place to find my book would be at your local bookstore, and you can ask them to get it if they don't already carry it, but it is available anywhere that books are sold online too. I am most active on Instagram, which is just Lindsay-Jean Hard, but I do have a website too, which is my name, and you can reach me from the contact form on there.
Same for us. We push everything out through Instagram, but like it's the only place. I guess it's the only place that's worth still going.
I have the most fun on Instagram.
Yeah, everything else depresses me.
Yeah.
If I want Facebook, I'll just watch the news. Like I can't. Every time I go into Facebook within 2 minutes, I'm not sad about my stuff. I'm just sad about the world, man. It's depressing what people are sharing. Hold on, before we go, and I always do this, watch Ryan's face, it drives him crazy. We did promote the book, but we did kind of generally, and I would love for you to like give us some private, secret, like what's your favorite?
I have to go with the banana peel cake. I mean, as Ryan mentioned, there is like a story behind it that it's connected with my grandmother and my childhood, but then it's just also the craziest recipe. Like, no one believes you can cook with banana peels and come up with a delicious cake. So it has to be that one.
How about Mike's?
That's a great question. I don't know what he would say. My daughter would say the banana peel cake too.
Really?
Okay.
Well, I'm thinking Mike's a smart guy. He's assertive and picks up his surroundings. He's probably going to go with the banana peel cake too.
It'd be the safe bet.
Thank you. Honestly, coming on the show it's such an honor to meet you. It was really special talking to you about the book, getting a little bit of background info, but I think just honestly the inception of it, hearing, and imagining you transplanted to some kind of city a long way away and you making more than the best of it. Sometimes those roads, it's not a fork, it's a hard left, and keep going down it. Good things keep happening.
Yeah, exactly. Just if you're open to the opportunity.
If I want to find that story about your grandmother and the banana peel cake, is that in the book?
It is, I think it's a little bit abbreviated in the book, but it is there, and it is also on Food 52. I wrote about it.
So to our listeners, that's your goal. Order this book, read it yourself, maybe order a second copy for somebody. It's really, really cool. And check out that story about her grandma. It's pretty neat. The book itself is called Cooking with Scraps, right?
Yes.
I could have messed that up. Cooking with Scraps. Yeah. And if you want to get it, you can get it anywhere. She would prefer that you get it from a small business, local business. If you want to find us on Instagram, you don't have to pay for us at all. We're at convention_not_podcast. Or you can find us in any of those other social media channels that are out there, I guess. So, thanks again. I hear your pup said goodbye.
That's beautiful.
And we really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks.
Thank you again for having me. It was so nice to meet you both.
Beautiful. We'll say hi next time.